Welcome to the Aging Well Firefighter, the podcast for first responders, our families, and the communities we serve. Whether you're on the front lines or standing with us, I'm here to help you fight wisely and age bravely. In our last episode, we looked at loneliness. Not the kind that lasts an evening, but the kind that seeps into our bones and our biology. We talked about how connection is medicine and how people keep people alive. But here's the question that keeps coming up for me. What does that medicine actually look like when it's working? How do real everyday firefighters, people who live in constant chaos, build the kind of relationships that protect them not just from danger, but from burnout? My guest today, Mollie Kallas, knows that answer from both sides of the radio. By day, she's a clinical supervisor leading addiction recovery services for Church Health Services. By night, she trades the counseling office for Turnout gear as a firefighter and a health and safety officer with the Columbus Fire Department. Mollie has lived the full spectrum, from treatment rooms to structure fires. And she's learned that whether you're talking about sobriety or survival, the prescription is the same: connection. In our conversation, we'll look at how mental and physical health intersect in the fire service, why peer support truly matters, and how simple habits of checking in can close the gap between toughness and true resilience. Stay with me, because what Mollie shares will change how you think about mental health, about teamwork, and about what it means to take care of your crew and yourself. So you wear a number of hats. And before I started the interview, before I started recording here, Mollie, we talked a little bit about your experience in the fire service and what you've been doing as an AODA counselor and with Church Health Services. For listeners who don't know you yet, can you give us an idea of what like a day in the life of your role looks like? And I'm talking about what you do as a counselor and what you do as a firefighter.
Sure. So my day job right now, I'm serving as a clinical supervisor. I oversee an AODA program. I've been doing that for about a year. In total, I've been in the counseling world for about 12.
Oh,
So I work with individuals who are battling addiction, whether they're in the community or incarcerated. A lot of them, too, are dual diagnosed with mental health. And a lot of that is just guiding their treatment, supporting their recovery, helping them build kind of stability in their lives and giving them back a sense of purpose. During the evenings, I switch gears completely. That turns into firefighter and a health and safety officer. So I'm kind of waiting for my pager to go off and responding to car accidents or structure fires or medical emergencies. I do some work with the county teams as well and provide peer support and debriefings after traumatic calls that we might have. And that helps first responders kind of unpack the emotional impact on what we see through our calls. So no days are alike, and that's what I love about it. I love the chaos. I love that I'm able to help people in both of the roles that I have, and they seem kind of different on paper, but they both really revolve around the same thing of just showing up for our people and meeting their needs.
yeah. As a fellow health and safety officer, I think sometimes we get a bad rap.
Yes, I would agree.
People think that we're there to be the party pooper.
Yeah.
But really, we're there to make sure that everybody can, as we put it, have fun in their job
Yeah.
and still go home at the end of the day. As a health and safety officer, does what you do as a counselor influence that? I'm speaking personally, what I do as a fitness professional really does influence what I do as a health and safety officer, from stress management to wellness and fitness. Does what you do influence what you do as a health and safety officer?
Yeah, I would think so. Health and safety, that for me is mental health and physical health.
Right.
So, in our physical often ties in with our mental. So if we can practice, stress management or healthy eating, exercising, things like that, and then putting those into our day-to-day routines, I think that overall helps us on both jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And like I said, it's always nice to run into a fellow health and safety officer because, sometimes we try to maintain a low profile because we do get a
Yes.
bad rap sometimes.
Yes.
You've seen in fire and as a health and safety officer, you're somebody who kind of sometimes takes that 30,000 foot view of a scene. You've seen how the physical and the emotional kind of intersect in this career as far as demands go. What drew you to focus on the mental health and support side of service?
I think a lot of times mental health is getting overlooked, not necessarily only in the fire service, but in society as a whole. Like I said, I've been doing the counseling for about 12 years, and we've been able to see how often community members and first responders, especially men, unfortunately, in this field, they're taught, to tough it, tough it out, stuff
Right.
it down, and kind of just get over it. But the reality is that we are going in to situations that we know are going to have a lasting emotional impact, and most of the time that's negative, and that's okay. We choose to do that, but we're seeing things that people normally won't, not being a first responder. So because of that, I firmly believe that we owe it to our first responders to make their mental health a priority and to make that a normalized part of our job. So we want it to be something that's available, but also encouraged and not judged upon.
Right. And I'm assuming that as a counselor yourself, your background in counseling influences how you approach mental health from a peer support standpoint and other ways.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
How do you encourage people on your department or your crews to take their mental health seriously or to not shy away from the difficult conversations?
Sure. So with the Columbus Fire side of things, we've worked really hard to try and break that stigma.
Yeah.
We've worked really hard to implement a peer support outlet, and that goes along with the debriefs. It's more than just, hey, come talk about it. We're trying to really promote a healthy, safe, confidential environment
Mhm.
for people to be able to come to. And that includes, we've got low end black helmets, white helmets. We've got different officers and different firefighters involved in this so that if a person isn't comfortable going to an officer, maybe they have a black helmet that they can go to. They have a pastor. We really push our EAP programs, we push the debriefs. And while they're optional, they work. They're really helpful, and we're using them well, and it seems to be helping.
Yeah, you mentioned they're optional, and I agree that peer support should be voluntary. Do you find that a lot of people make use of those peer support resources, or are you still kind of trying to get people used to the idea of doing that?
We were a little slow moving at first, and I think that shows kind of where a generational gap is a little bit,
Yeah.
but it is growing, and I think a lot of times it takes a couple people to utilize the resource, whether it is peer support or it is debrief, and they can talk to other people about how it helped them positively and how they found some sort of relief going to those things. We have been growing and we have been utilizing them more. It's unfortunate that we've had to utilize them more,
Right.
but they're a positive resource, and I think over time, in the last couple of years, we've really had people get more engaged in them.
Okay. You mentioned the generational gap. How do you see that play into? And I see you laughing because I kind of know what you're going to say. How do you see that generational gap play into how firefighters talk about mental health
Sure.
and connection?
So there is a very big generational gap between, the guys that are on for 15, 20 years that were taught to stuff it down. We don't talk about it. They think that they're weak if they talk about it, or they can't do their job if they talk about things that they've seen. And then on the complete opposite side of things, we have, people that are 5 or so years in, and they've got a plethora of resources now, and they want to start talking about it. But we have to bridge that gap between, well, the older officer doesn't talk about it, so why should I? So there's definitely a mix in there. But again, that comes back to just promoting it of like, your mental health is just as important as your physical health. And if we can normalize this more and make it part of your job, it's going to benefit people.
Do you think younger people are more likely to be more open about mental health issues because that's how they were trained up in school? Do you notice that?
Yeah, I would think so. I think we see it in the schools now too, especially like you said, they're doing more gratitude, they're doing more
Mhm.
mindfulness, they're
Yeah.
doing, they're implementing meditation and they're bringing in more counselors to normalize that just in the school system. And again, there's more resources available now. So we have online resources. So if a person's not comfortable being one-on-one with a therapist, they can do it over telehealth. So that might make them more comfortable if they're in their home. We have significantly improved EAP programs, and the more people that use it, if they have a positive experience, they talk about it and they want to share it with their
Right.
peers. So it definitely makes a difference.
Okay. The article that I wrote recently talked about relationships as a kind of armor or a kind of turnout gear that's essential to our survival. Do you feel in your experience that strong peer connections are important to first responders, not just mentally, but physically?
Absolutely. This was an analogy that I loved, and it's something that I would have never thought about, but that absolutely sticks true. When we talk about our turnout gear, that's protecting us from heat on the scene, things like that. But then on the flip side of that, our relationships are going to protect us on our emotional wear and tear. It's a hard job, it's a taxing job. So we need to have those relationships in place so that we're not carrying everything by ourselves. So it's important if we check in on people, when we're off shift, on shift, whatever it may be, we just need people who are going to be supportive of us and hold us accountable to take care of ourselves as well.
So, where do you see loneliness or disconnection most often creeping in the first responder crowd?
I think the loneliness comes from when we have quiet. We're so used to chaos. We're so used to the pager goes off, our heart is racing, our adrenaline is going. But a lot of the times we're not talking about the quiet drive home or, we're getting home, we're taking a shower and we're trying to lay down. And it's just, there's that silence when our adrenaline is fading. And I think that's when it hits first responders a lot.
Yeah.
So we just need to see that you're not going to burden your families and you're not going to burden your friends or your peers if you need to open up and you need to talk about these things. Like we talked about, the job is hard. The job can be emotionally taxing in a negative way. And that trauma over time, it's going to start building up. And if we don't have a healthy way to release that or to cope with that, we start pulling away, whether it's from our coworkers or our jobs or, kind of not paying attention to ourselves either way. So a lot of times too, after things like that, if we're not talking about it, we're not sleeping. So then we're sleep deprived, we're stressed out. There's a lot of things that go through that and we want to just shake it off. But connecting with our peers, it's critical for this job. And not even for this job, it's critical for everybody to have somebody in their system. So we need to kind of bridge that gap and truly ask somebody if they're okay and if they need support. And that way they know that they're not a burden onto anybody else.
Do you find that people reaching out and saying, "Are you okay?" genuinely helps people open up?
I think so, and I think sometimes it's, in passing, "Hey, how's it going? I'm fine. How are you?" Those conversations
Right, yeah.
they're kind of in passing, right? So they don't sound as meaningful and as genuine, but if we're actually sitting down, pulling them aside in private, "Are you okay? What do you need?"
Okay.
If we're asking those open-ended questions of, "What do you need?" or "What can I do for you?" That kinda opens the conversation further too of like, "I can provide you resources. I can provide you support." That way it's a flowing conversation versus yes or no questions.
So if somebody feels like they're seeing one of their peers struggle, maybe one of the best things they can do is not necessarily corner them, but get them into a little more private setting and say, How are you doing really?"
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's a step in the right direction, and if they're not comfortable maybe talking to a peer, we have other resources. We have EAPs, we have other professionals that they can talk to, but starting that conversation at least opens the door and lets them know that they're not alone.
Okay. So private one-on-ones are very effective, but in our industry, also very effective are the group debriefs after a call, and you facilitate those. How do those shared experiences help build a crew's sense of connection with each other?
Sure. I think that our debriefs, they provide a space that's secure, it's safe, and it's where people can talk openly about the calls that they've been on.
Okay.
Something that we do with our debriefs is it's limited to the people who were on scene versus the entire department. That way it's kind of more intimate in who was actually there. It's a trusting environment and you're not sharing all these extra details with people who weren't there. I think that they've really strengthened at least our department as a
Okay.
whole. Like I said earlier, we've In the last year, we've unfortunately gotten good at debriefs, which is not really a skill that we would like to have. But with that, I think it brought a lot of growth. It brought a lot of openness. When we first started doing them, it was a little bit new. So there was some nervousness with it, but we really stressed that it's confidential, it's judgment free. We've got professionals in the room, including like a pastor. So if you need to get up and leave, you can. Then there is no judgment. It's a complete, safe, and secure place. And I think it's become a healthy part of our department.
Okay. Going back to that generational gap, do you see a difference generationally between kind of the more veteran firefighters and the younger guys and gals in how they approach those CISDs?
I think initially there was some resistance. Again, we're going back to, well, we didn't do it that way
Right.
30, 40 years ago, you know? But I really think that especially with the older generation being engaged and being open to it and really trying it and seeing that it works, it's bringing our younger generation into it too. It's normalizing that you can be doing this job for 20 years and something maybe could be bothering you from 10 years ago. There is no timeline on any of these things. So I think that while there was resistance in the beginning, we've really come together as a whole. And now we've got 25, 30-year veterans that are going to these and are actually getting something out of it. And we've got our 2 years that are getting something out of it. So,
I know for a long time, a lot of us will just try to tough things out.
Yeah,
And a lot of firefighters will take pride in compartmentalizing things. How do you, as a counselor, go about helping somebody recognize when the professional toughest they think they have has really crossed into an unhealthy sort of isolation?
sure. I think compartmentalizing, it can be a strength but it can also be a risk in the field that we do. I think to a point, it helps firefighters and first responders really, they're focused, they're able to work in chaos and they're able to just get through the moment. But at the same time, if they're going home and they're isolating because they don't want to talk about the things and they think that they can't talk about those things, it's going to turn into a negative. So when we're trying to kind of recognize that, we're looking for if they're withdrawing from their family or if they're not taking care of themselves like they used to, if they're attached or irritable, or sometimes it's the humor, the dark humor that we want to talk about, but that's
Right.
really, we're kind of avoiding things. So I think if we kind of reframe that and we look at it as a strength, we have to take care of ourselves to be able to take care of the people that we're going to the calls for and to be able to take care of the community members. So it's not about losing our professional toughness. It's about how can we strengthen that and also take care of ourselves while we're taking care of the community.
Right. And I think taking care of each other extends beyond the walls of the station
Absolutely.
to relationships outside of the job. What role do you see peer support programs playing in helping develop those outside of the station relationships?
I think peer support is really reminding people that we're not by ourselves, we're not alone, and we all go home to our families, and we all maybe go home to our group of friends, and we all might, not hang out as the 40 of us all together, but it really does bridge the gap that we're all responders, and we're all doing this job, and we need to be supportive of each other. We're getting lucky enough that departments around our area are asking for assistance with things like that and how they can build these programs into their department, which is, I mean, that's amazing that we're doing it. And peer support also kind of shows that it's not overly clinical. We're just trying to create a culture where people feel safe in what they're doing and they feel safe in their family.
Yeah. So you've got that support system baked into the culture of your department now in Columbus.
Mhm.
For responders who are listening that don't have that support baked into the culture of their department, what are some ways that they can create that same sense of safety and connection in their crews? And how can leaders model that and start to make it part of the culture?
I think it's important to remember that any connection in any peer support program, it can start small. It doesn't have to be something that's a large structured meeting. It can be as small as quick text message checking in after a tough call, or let's go grab some coffee, or like we talked about earlier, how are you actually doing?
Mm.
What can I provide for you? And with things like that that are informal, kind of before we get to like a formal debrief, it shows that you're interested, you care about their well-being, and it's starting to bring that trust in. Leaders, officers, chiefs, they play a huge role in setting that tone, and we really, we go back to the generational gap, and they're seeing, if my senior members are willing to share their experiences and what they went through and how they worked through it, that's them kind of acknowledging, yeah, this does suck. Yeah, this is tough to go home from, but these are ways that we can work through it. It's showing that you can be vulnerable but still do this difficult job.
As far as recovering from a traumatic event or a difficult scene after the fact, what kinds of simple or repeatable habits have you seen or do you know of that could help first responders boost their mental and emotional resilience, either individually or as a group?
I think it kinda goes back to the last question too, where it can be something small. You can start small, both on the health and safety aspect side of things and the counselor side of things.
Mhm.
We can be physically active. We can get enough sleep or try and get get enough sleep, between the
Yes.
pager and everything, and we need to find those healthy outlets outside of work, whether it's we're spending time with our family, we're engaging in the hobbies that we like, anything to take a few minutes to decompress after a shift or reflect rather than immediately pushing those emotions out and not dealing with them. So, as a team, something that we are practicing right now is we are doing the simple check-ins. We may not have had somebody pass away, but it may have been, a traumatic injury or something like that. And that still is as quick as send a text message, make a phone call, just make sure people are okay. And we're implementing, department meals, birthday meals, group workouts, just things like that to bring people together and to see that the camaraderie is there, the support is there. We have to use it.
So it's being intentional about developing
Yeah,
those relationships.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. For others who might be listening and not part of the emergency services, what is one thing that you feel like they should know about supporting the mental health of first responders in their lives and in their communities?
I think the biggest thing that I would want families or spouses to know is that support doesn't always mean you have to have the perfect word to say. You don't have to have the perfect answer. A lot of the times, people in this job, they just want somebody to listen. They want somebody to not judge them and to just be there, to offer space and to offer support and reminding them that they're not alone. It goes a long way. So, I think it is important to understand that when a first responder is quiet or distant, if it's right after a tough call, they might not be shutting people out, but sometimes they need to process as well. So we have to give them grace and we have to ask them how they're doing. And we have to just remind them that you're there for them. That way they know that they're not alone. It's connection and the understanding is just, we go back to what you talked about with the turnout gear. That connection and that support is just as important as our gear is to protect our physical. So that support is really helping us to stay grounded. And we're human. We have a difficult job and we all have emotions, but we need that support so that we can go back at 100% and keep doing our job.
Right. One of the challenging things for my wife to adjust to was me coming home after a rough swing or having had a rough call and wanting me to talk about it right away, when really all I wanted to do was just to sit
Yeah.
and have her be there with
Right.
me and not have to feel like I needed to unload or be conversational at the
Yeah.
time. Do you feel like that is kind of broadly true among first responders?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think having that open conversation of just because I'm not talking, I'm not upset with you. I'm not looking, it's part of the job, It's an emotional day and sometimes ours is more taxing than others. So I think reminding your spouse or friends or whoever it is that you'll talk when you're ready. You just need space. You need, like you said, you need them to be there. You need the comfort of knowing that they're there and when you're ready, you can talk to them and they can support you. It just might not be as quick as some of us want it to
Right.
be.
Yeah. Now, you also are involved with Church Health Services in Beaver Dam. I'm a big fan of them because they provide free mental and behavioral health support to first responders through grants. How did that partnership start?
Yeah, so I actually was talking with somebody on the Beaver Dam Fire Department, and They mentioned that there was a resource in the area. It was low income and free resources, but their AODA program was struggling a little bit. And I was to the point in my career where I was looking for a little bit of a step down, a little bit of a break in the caseload that I had. So I applied and I shared with them what I've been doing in the AODA world for the last few years and talked about what it could bring to the program. So since then, I've been there as their supervisor for a little over a year. We really have created a lot of connections with the mental health world, with veterans, with first responders. I work heavily with Department of Corrections too in Dodge County, and that it's incredible to see how when the right people are involved in certain programs, they can really grow,
Mm.
and we can make a huge impact on the community.
Wow, that's great. You and I had a chance to talk before we started the interview about church health services and the services that they make available to first responders. If a firefighter or an EMT or other kind of first responder, dispatcher, law enforcement officer wanted to tap into that resource, what is the simplest first step for them?
I think we just need to start the conversation, which I know I sound like I'm on repeat a little bit,
Oh,
but
no.
it's really just starting the conversation with somebody that you trust, whether it's a friend, a peer support person, and a qualified counselor. We don't have to have the perfect words, but if we can just say, "Hey, I'm struggling lately. I need help," that at least gets a person pointed in the right direction. It is a great spot to start, I think, with a peer support program because that's people who are going through the same things as you. You know, it sometimes is difficult to find a counselor or somebody in EAP who really knows firsthand what we're going through. So if we can start even at that level, it kind of normalizes a little bit of, okay, you are somebody who's seen this. You do get it on a little bit of a deeper level. But that's not to say we can still use our EAP. We can still reach out to our mental health counselors or somebody who's trained in things like that. There's plenty of resources. We just need to know when somebody needs it.
Yeah. If there's a first responder out there that wants to make use of the services that church health services makes available, how do they make use of that?
Kind of the same way. So we do have licensed counselors on both the AODA side of things and the mental health side of things,
Okay. AODA meaning?
alcohol and drug.
Okay.
And so there's services kind of all over the place with that. We also there's a little bit of a dental clinic in there as well. So if people need help with their physical health, mental health, drug addiction, substance abuse, anything like that, we have the resources for that. And if we don't, we know where to point you in the right
Okay.
direction.
Great. I'll make sure I include that information in the show notes for this. Molly, when you look back over your years in the fire service, what is a story that stands out to you that captures either the really strongly healing power of connection or maybe illustrates the effects that can be had when connection is missing?
So I've been in the fire service for about 6 years now. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of is that we've embraced peer support. We've embraced debriefs and talking about things and starting these conversations. So what started as a few conversations about mental health a couple years ago has grown into something that's just part of who we are now. Our members are talking, they're showing up for each other. We've got neighboring departments that are reaching out and asking how to build similar programs because they're seeing how it works and how these connections are really moving us in a positive direction. And it's incredible to witness the people, that while they might have thought it wasn't super important are now some of the people that are the most heavily engaged, and they're, the ones that are really promoting it. So I think when we don't have that connection, it kind of shows our communication breaks down a little bit. We might have a little lapse in trust, or we might not be functioning as strongly as we can. And we have to remember that we have to lean on each other and we have to be strong and resilient. And being that support system for ourselves and for the rest of our members, it reflects on the community and reflects that they can depend on us because we are strong and we are level headed and we are taking care of ourselves like we are for them.
I love hearing that. So, we started this whole conversation around the idea or the concept that relationships are as protective as our gear. And one standard issue piece of gear that we all get is a helmet. I know a lot of firefighters that keep a picture maybe of their wife or their family or their kids in their helmet. If you could put one line or a picture inside every first responder's helmet, something that they would see on every shift as they grabbed that piece of gear, what would that say or be?
That is an incredibly tough question, but I think it's so important. Like you said, we're gonna see it every day. I think I would write that strength isn't just carrying our call. We have to give ourselves grace and we have to carry each other. It's so important that we support ourselves, but also the people that are running with us.
That's fantastic, Molly. Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you for everything you do, not just as a counselor, but as a first responder. I know that you've had some tough calls. I know that you have really expanded your skill set over the last several years. And I want to tell you, as a fellow first responder, how much I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you
Thank you,
so
Molly.
much.
Every generation in the fire service has its own version of toughness, and we all pride ourselves on running toward chaos. But as Molly reminded us, that chaos can become its own coping mechanism. We stay busy, we stay distracted, and sometimes the adrenaline keeps us from noticing what hurts. Just like in the gym, you don't feel how sore you are until you stop moving. In this job, you don't always realize how lonely you are until the pager finally goes quiet. Now, the lesson here isn't that chaos is bad. It's that recovery, connection, and stillness have to be part of our personal protective equipment. They're what let us keep showing up strong. Molly's perspective drives home the same message we explored in my article, Relationships Are Medicine. The same way turnout gear shields your body from heat, relationships protect your heart and your mind from emotional flashover. So, as you head into this week, take a minute to grab that cup of coffee with a crewmate. Send that text. Ask the honest question, how are you really doing? Those small acts of connection are the first steps in preventive medicine. Your challenge this week is when the noise dies down, don't rush to fill it. Sit in the still moment, notice what surfaces, and reach out where connection feels thin. That's where healing starts. If this conversation with Molly hit home for you, share it with a friend or your crew or your family. You can find links to church health services and to other resources in the show notes. And if you want to connect with me directly, I'll leave my contact information there as well. Next time, in part 3 of this Connection is Medicine series, we'll zoom out and take a 30,000-foot view from the personal to the global, exploring how entire communities can build connection right into their culture, and how that literally adds years of healthy life. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And remember, the strongest thing you can do this week might not be another overtime shift or workout. It might be taking a breath, sitting still, and reaching out. Because connection doesn't just make life pleasant, it makes life possible. If you've got your own story you'd like to share, I'd love to hear it. Please reach out. And if you'd like to be a guest on this podcast, let's make that happen too. Now, until next time, listener, fight wisely and age bravely.